Well, good afternoon to the wonderful women here. You all look lovely. In my language, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat, which means good afternoon to you all. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Tegan. Thank you for Maddie and the girls in the Melbourne church. This place is beautiful. And I know there's a lot of hard work and prayers that have gone into this. So I'm really, really so grateful to be here with you all today. But yes, as Maddie shared, my name is Isa. I currently live and work in Sydney, so I'm Aussie now. And I get to work as a campus minister at the University of North South Wales as a campus minister. So I share God's word with women just like you. And today I'm going to talk about being crowned with confidence. But I admit, I had to start by talking about a girl who was crowned, but not exactly very confident. And this girl was given the world on a platter. She had every reason by the world's standards to be confident, and yet behind closed doors, she crumbled with cowardice. And yes, spoiler alert, that girl is me. And so for some context, I was born in Hong Kong, and I was raised in the Philippines, and I finished university in America. And so in one word, my upbringing was privileged. Both of my parents grew up in immigrant families in America. They were single parents. And so they were set on giving me like the resources, the opportunities, the support that they never really had. They raised me both in a Catholic and Protestant upbringing. And so they instilled in me this idea that my talents were from God and that God expected me to use them to the best of my ability. And so I started dancing and doing gymnastics from the age of 4. I started playing sports like volleyball, touch rugby, and softball all over Southeast Asia. I flew around the world experiencing different cultures, and I was educated in an international school in the Philippines and went on to Princeton University in America. And so by all means, I was crowned. I had my life set. And I'm very grateful to God and to my parents because of this upbringing, but I have to come clean. Over all of those years, I feared that I would never be able to live up to the expectations that all of these resources brought me to. And so I grew up in the Philippines, and I knew that my life was not at all normal. Living in the third world, I saw that my lifestyle was so divorced from reality. And so the more opportunities I got, the more pressure I felt, and also the more guilt I felt that welled up inside of me. There was this voice that said, someone like you should do something great with your life. You're going to change the world. And I really believed that, and I had that understanding. But the crippling weight of just expectation made me want to hide. I might have been good at performing on stages, but inside I was running from myself. Because the truth was, I hated being chosen. You know, like, no matter what I did, God kept putting me into leadership positions. And for a moment, it feels good to be chosen, right? You want to be chosen for the team. You want to be chosen in class. But when I realized the responsibility that came with being chosen, I wanted to run away. I thought, would I ever be enough to do my parents' sacrifice justice? Would I ever do enough to do justice to my country or to my people? I would perform and look good on the outside so that nobody would dare come close and ask me the question that I hated the most. Why'd you pick her? You know, when I was the only person in my entire country to be admitted to Princeton University, why her? When I was the one chosen to represent the Philippines in touch rugby here in Australia, why her? When I was given the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study art around the world for a year, why her? And you'd think that all this external validation would feel really good and make me confident, right? But the more I was chosen, the more insecure and afraid I was that they would see into the real me and they would just see how broken and how insecure and how inadequate really I was. They might see this talented, confident, bold person, but really all I felt was fake. I felt like what they say, imposter syndrome, like I was a visitor in my own body, especially in university where I was surrounded by people who were far more talented than I was. The daily struggle of comparing myself, my grades, my internships, how many languages I speak, my extracurriculars, it was so exhausting. And I didn't know how I could justify being there. And so I just dove into everything that I could, dance groups and clubs and extracurriculars. It was as if I was waiting for someone to just tell me, you belong here. But all I wanted deep down was to be seen for who I was, who I really was, to be confident in myself just because I am, not because of what I do. You know, I was really good at performing for other people, but I had no idea who I was or what I was created for. And so there's a woman in the Bible I'm going to talk about today who also struggled with being confident to stand out, even if she was a queen. And her name is Esther. Some of you might know. But we're going to look at her story of how she was crowned with a confidence that came not from the world, but from God. And so I have one point for you today, which is stand out queen. And so Esther, for some context, she was a Jewish woman, and she was born into a very dark period of Jewish history where they were subject to exile in Babylon. So though the Jews were God's chosen people, God had allowed them to be subject to the rule of King Xerxes, who was the ruler of the Medo-Persian Empire in 486 BC. So in a display of his great splendor and riches, the king, he throws a banquet and summons his wife, Queen Vashti, to appear before him and his royal court of men wearing nothing but her crown. Talk about degrading. You're the queen and your own husband called you in naked just to wear your crown. And so she refuses to go and to endure such humiliation. And as a consequence, King Xerxes deposes her and begins to search for a newer, younger queen. And so this is where Esther enters into the story. A young, beautiful Jewish woman, Esther was an orphan raised by her uncle Mordecai, who worked in the royal court. And as with all the other young women in the land, she was summoned to the palace to be presented to the king. But by God's divine hand, Esther stood out among all the other women. When she appeared before the men entrusted with the harem, where all the women stayed, the Bible writes about her in Esther 2:9. It says this: "She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics." So it seems like Esther was living the life. The number 7 in the Bible represents perfection. So the fact that she was given 7 attendants means that she was really taken care of. And God made her beautiful. There was something about her, maybe a warmth or a gentleness or a peace that just attracted people to her. Yet it doesn't change the fact that her circumstances were extreme and dire. You might be thinking 12 months of beauty treatments, that doesn't sound so bad at all, right? But if you think about it, the previous queen was just deposed for not following the king's orders. So this was a pretty life or death situation. Also, not to mention, Esther had been told from Mordecai to keep her family background and her ethnicity a secret for fear that she might be discriminated against. And so I can imagine that these 12 months were not luxurious at all. I imagine that they were quite agonizing. A young woman taken by circumstances and forces completely out of her control to be objectified to become queen, but also being faced with the uncertainty of what would happen if she was chosen or if she wasn't. Imagine the gossip about her, the accusations of her being the favorite woman, the hatred and the comparison from the competition. Her internal dialogue might have sounded something like this: "Can I really do this? Why me? If they really knew I was an orphan or I was Jewish, they wouldn't choose me. What if I fail publicly and disappoint my family, my country, my people?" Yet, as we keep reading, God, of course, as he does, had other plans for Esther. And the King Xerxes, becomes more and more attracted to her over time, and he crowns her to be queen. So not long after Esther becomes queen, some drama plays out in the palace, and one of the king's advisors, Haman, convinces the king that the Jews should be annihilated. So Haman is an Agagite, the mortal enemy of the Jews, and he hatches this elaborate plan to wipe out the Jews. But of course, Mordecai somehow learns about this plot, and he pleads with Queen Esther to use her position in order to save the day, even if it means that she could be executed for it. And so when I read Esther's story, I can imagine the weight of the pressure she was under, keeping her true identity a secret while having to play this role of being queen. I can imagine the temptation to run away and the aching desire to just be like everybody else, to not have to live up to society's expectations. I can imagine the resentment of being faced with this great responsibility of literally saving her people, even though she didn't choose to be queen, nor did she choose to be Jewish. The insecurity and the anxiety was real. And now she was tasked with saving her people. There was no talent, no charm that could get her out of this position. And so Esther, understandably so, she hesitates at first to stand up to the king. But Mordecai's words made all the difference. And in Esther 4:13-14, it reads, "He sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arrive from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Mordecai reminds Esther that nothing about her being queen was a coincidence. The time that she was born, the fact that she fit the requirements of a virgin precisely, her family background, and that her uncle was in the royal court. God was calling her to see that everything that he had given her, beauty, charm, ethnicity, it was meant to serve a greater purpose for her people. Everything about her was wonderfully unique, on purpose, for a purpose. And so Esther replies, "Go, gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." No matter what she felt, the fact was, God chose her. She could have played the victim. She could have run away from the pressure. But instead, she showed great character. That under pressure, she found her confidence in believing that God created her for that very moment. So it wasn't easy at all. She had to humble herself for 3 days. She fasted, and she got her strength from God. But she comes out with this confident resolve to die, to do what God has called her to do. She may have been crowned by the world, but it wasn't until this moment, her private moment with God, that she truly was crowned with confidence. And she exemplifies the scripture in 1 Peter 3:3-4 that I want to read to you. It says, "Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight." So Esther teaches us that the beauty of having a gentle and quiet spirit is that we're not consumed with outward appearances, but we get to see ourselves from God's eyes, fully loved for who we are. You know, Esther models for us the power of finding our worth in God's sight, the true source of confidence. Fun fact, the word confidence in Latin actually means to fully trust. And so Esther fully trusted that God made her exactly as she was for such a time as this. And the book of Esther is actually quite unique because it's the only book in the Bible where there's no record of God's voice, nor of religious offerings or of prayer. And that makes her story even more impressive because even though God's voice is absent, his hand in her life, the protection, the favor, it's undeniable. The way that he chose her and elevated her at just the right time to save his people, it shows us how perfect his plan is for every one of us. And so in my own life, God softened my heart at just the right time to read the Bible. Freshly graduated in the pandemic, I had reached my breaking point of performing for other people. And I achieved all that I wanted at school. I got thesis awards and scholarships. I was surrounded by friends, but I was painfully lonely. I lived in New York pursuing a career in the performing arts as a dancer, which, as you can imagine, is all about finding value in your performance. And I was surrounded by people, but I never felt seen. I longed to be taught how to find confidence in God. So I prayed, as many of the women shared a while ago, to find women who could teach me how to do that. And God worked really quickly. I went on Google, as you do when you're looking for answers, and I Googled Christian Creatives New York. And I found a community of women who could study the Bible with me, but also push me to use my talents for God. And I was really pleasantly surprised by what I found, because though I grew up around the Bible, like Precious, it was the first time that I felt really seen by God. It felt like a personal love letter that God wrote to me, showing me that I was valuable, even in my quiet, weak, insecure moments. I studied the Bible and others showed me the love of God through the cross and how he yearned to have a relationship with me and crown me with inner confidence. I figured if someone was willing to die for me, even though I didn't really like him very much, I must be pretty important. I found the deep fulfillment of finally knowing that I was created solely to know God and be known by him. I saw that I was special and unique in God's eyes, and that my talents serve a bigger purpose, which include coming down here from Sydney to speak to all of you today. And so I didn't become a Christian to be loved, but because I understood the depth of God's love, that perhaps everything in my life had come together for such a time as this. Instead of feeling all this pressure to live up to those expectations I talked about a while ago, I was finally grateful that God had given me so many random talents and passions and hobbies so that I could not just use them for my own validation, but actually connect with other women looking for God. I could use my dance passion to connect with other dancers. I could use my sports in order to help athletes to find God. And so I even got to choreograph dances all over the Philippines at women's days just like this one, because God called me to. And so finally I saw that my talents were not for me to keep, but they were for me to give away. And the same is true for every single woman in this room. I want to ask you, what talents has God given you? What do you truly believe that you were made for? Because you are unique. In Psalm 139, I love that Christine read this. It says in verse 13 to 16, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." So to the women here, your life is irreplaceable. You're valuable beyond measurement. Not because of what you do or how you look, though you look beautiful, but because it is God who created you. Even before you existed, God knew that you were extraordinary and planned awesome things out for your life, not just for your own benefit, but for the salvation of many people in your life. There's nobody else like you in the entire world. And think about that, it's crazy. No one else who thinks like you, speaks like you, can do what you do. But how much time do we spend trying to escape ourselves? Creating avatars, filters. We spend so much money and time running away from ourselves. When in fact, God handcrafted us. And he literally called us beautiful. So even though the world screams, you're not enough, God created us to be more than enough, even when you were in your mother's womb. He created you exactly as you are and chose you to have a relationship with him forever, to become more than you ever thought you could be because of his love. And so I know that you are created to impact the world because it desperately needs you to love being the you that God created you to be. Mark Twain once said, "The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why." No one in all the world is like you or will ever be like you or will ever do what you do or will be called to the purpose that you have. And so I want to encourage all the women here, study the Bible with the woman who brought you out to find out what is it that God really created you for. I hope that today you deeply understand why God made you and that it gives you the confidence to stand out, queen. Thank you for letting me share.